Salvete omnes. This is exercise A of the start of the year review, focusing on third and 3rd-io conjugations. Make sure that you have read the lesson about identification of third conjugation and 3rd-io conjugation verbs, as well as make sure you've watched the videos. So let's go ahead and synopsize some third conjugation and 3rd-io conjugation verbs. So the first one, exercise A, ago, agere, egi, actus. So look at the principal parts. Ago, agere, egi, actus. This is a third conjugation verb. You can tell by the O, the ere. This is a short E-R-E. If the first principal part ended in ao, like ageo, it would be a second conjugation, and this E would be long. It's not, though. This is a third conjugation. O, ere, e, us. So almost all Latin verbs, their third principal parts end in an I, pronounced E, and then the fourth principal part, us. Some textbooks say It doesn't really matter. Us, Remember, this is the adjective form of the verb. It's a participle. So ago, agere, egi, actus. Unlike the first and second conjugations, the 3rd-io, and the fourth conjugation, they get the present stem by chopping the O off of the first principal part. In the first and second conjugations, you chopped the RE off of the second principal part, and that gave you the present stem. Nope, not anymore. Not for third, not for 3rd-io, and not for fourth. That's still good for the first and second conjugation. But for third conjugation, chop the O off of the first principal part to get the present stem, ag. The perfect stem is the same as first and second conjugation. In fact, across all conjugations, it's the same. Third principal part, chop off the letter I, the E. So the perfect stem for this verb is egg. And then the supine stem is found the exact same way for every verb. Chop the us off of the fourth principal part, and you get the supine stem act. A-C-T. It's like the English verb act. In fact, this verb means to do, to drive, or to act. So let's go ahead and synopsize in the first person singular. First person singular, so the I verb form. All right, if we're dealing with a first person singular, then the first thing that you do is write down the first principal part in the present active blank. So ago, unchanged. That's his only job. Ago, the first principal part, is to be the first person singular present active indicative. Ago. I do, I deal, I drive, I act. Ago. This is the present tense. In the passive, you write down that first principal part again, ago, only this time for the passive you add the r, the R ending for restur, mor, mini, untur. Remember, the active voice personal endings are O, S, T, mus, tis, und. Sometimes the O has an M. The passive voice personal endings are restur, mor, mini, untur. Okay, now that's out of the way. If it's any person and number besides the first person singular, so second person singular, third person singular, etc., then you would write the present stem, ag, down, as we're going to do for the imperfect and the future. Remember that the present stem is used as the base for the present, the imperfect, and the future active and also passive. It's just that the first person singular is kind of weird. It uses the first principal part. Otherwise, you would write ag. Now, if it were anything other than the first person singular, like second person singular or third person singular, you'd write ag, A-G, which is the stem. If it were duca, you'd write duke as the present stem, D-U-C, chopping the O off the first principal part. Then for most of the forms in the present tense, you add an I, letter I. So you get ago, agis, agit, agimus, agitis. For the third person plural, it's unt, U-N-T, so it would be agunt, agunt. For the passive, the passive endings are going to look like ar, like agor, Then it's going to be eris, E-R-I-S, eris. Then itor, I-T-U-R, itor. Then imor, then imini, then untor, U-N-T-U-R, untor. So it will be agor, ageres, agetor, agemor, agemini, aguntor. Okay, the imperfect and the future are not so bad. The imperfect is actually the easiest one. So the imperfect, you don't just add ba to the stem by itself. That's ugly. So an E is inserted before the ba, in between the stem and the ba. So you get ageba, ageba, and then add personal endings as normal. For the active, you're going to get M. For the passive, ra. So you get agebam and agebar. For the future, don't you dare put bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. Those are the future endings for only first and second conjugation. Do not put bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt for a third, 3rd-io, or fourth. You want es, et, emus, etis, ent. The passive endings are ar, eris, macron over the E, eris, etor, amor, emini, antor. So the future in full would be agam, ages, aget, agemus, agetis, agant. And the passive would be agar, ageris, agator, agamor, agamini, agantor. The difference between the second person singular, passive, present, and future is that there's a macron on the E in the future, the second person singular, passive, future. So it would be ageris in the present versus ageris in the future. But that's for second person singular. That's a different person and number. Let's focus on the task at hand. For the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect, well, that's easy because it's the same for every verb. You go to the third principal part, chop off the I, you get the perfect stem, which is going to be egg. Then you add the same endings that you've been adding already. So perfect endings, E isti it, imus istis erunt, pluperfect, eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant, and the future perfect is ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritis, erent. Erent is the ending. Erunt when it's the third person plural future of sum. For the perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, it follows the same rules as first and second conjugation. Fourth principal part, make sure you make it like an adjective, us a actus a We only put the singular us a masculine, feminine, and neuter because the person is singular. If this were first person plural, we'd write acti, I, a. For acti, acti, acta, masculine, feminine, neuter. But here it's singular, so actus, acta, actum. And then add the appropriate helping verb. Sum, eram, ero. Actus sum, actus sum, acta sum, actum sum, actus eram, and actus ero. For the imperatives, okay, for the imperative singular active, go to the second principal part and chop off the RE, and that's the imperative. Age, age. Looks like age. Yeah, but it's age. For the singular passive imperative, it's still the second principal part. Agere, agere. For the plural active imperative, you take the present stem ag, and then you add ite, agite, agite. So age becomes agite in the plural. And then agimini for the plural passive, agimini. So it's an I before the mini. So agere becomes agimini. Optime, that's ago in the first person singular, active and passive. Moving right along. Capio capere capi captus. First and foremost, you have to know the principal parts. Then you look at the principal parts and determine that this is a 3rd-io. It's even got an IO in its first principal part. That's why it's called the 3rd-io. Oh my gosh, some textbooks call it the third I stem. If that helps you. It probably doesn't, because you have an instant horror and aversion for the I stem, anything I stem. So 3rd-io is probably a better name for it. Capio, capere, capi, captus. So, like the third conjugation, you go to the first principal part and chop off the O to get to the present stem. The present stem is copy, copy. Now, you can always tell the present stem of a 3rd-io because it ends in an I. The second principal part will have an ere, capere, and then the third and the fourth, just like all the other verbs, the third ends in an I, pronounced e, the fourth ends in an us. You chop off the I, pronounced e, from the third principal part to get the perfect stem, and the us off the fourth principal part to get the supine stem, copt. So let's start with the present stem, which goes in the present, imperfect, future, active, and passive. We have the second person singular. Danger, Will Robinson. Be careful with the second person singular of a third conjugation or a 3rd-io conjugation. Should instantly set off alarm bells in your head. So let's tread cautiously. Make sure to reread the lesson. So present active. Write down copy, the present stem. Copy ends in an I. Copy. You're just going to add the personal endings. So ost, mustis, unt. Now for third person plural, they do add the unt, like in the third conjugation. So the third plural would be copiunt. But here it's just copis. Regular, easy copis. You take. You are taking. You do take. For the present passive, be careful. It might be your inclination to go ahead and write the present stem copy, but there's a problem. So what's going to happen is the I actually drops off the stem. You get cop, C-A-P, and then you add eris, E-R-I-S. So it's coperis, coperis with an accent on the A, coperis. That's a weird one. You may want to circle that one, star that one, mark that one especially, and study that one. Second person singular passive. It's an ERIS ending for third conjugation and 3rd-io, but in 3rd-io, the I of the stem will drop out. So, coperis, acciperis, interficeris, all those 3rd-ios. For the imperfect, it's the easiest one. It's copy, present stem, add the E like in third conjugation, so copy A, add the ba, so, and then the personal ending. Copiebas, copiebas, passive, copiebaris, copiebaris. You were taking, you were being taken. There's a being, Ben. Then for the future active, present stem copy, don't you dare add bobus bit. It's copy s et aemosatus ent. Copy s, es, copy s. For the passive, it will be copy, present stem, keep the I, copy, and then add eris, eris. There is a macron over the E in eris, but you don't have to put it. You do for the third conjugation, you don't have to for the fourth. So, copieris, copieris. The present is coperis, the future is copieris. The future retains the I of the stem. The present gets rid of it, nixes it. All right, the perfect, the pluperfect, future perfect. We are out of the woods. Now it's just clear and pleasant sailing. Sailing around woods? Be quiet. Perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, active uses the perfect stem, which is third principal part, chop off the I. So kep, C-E-P, kep. Add the appropriate endings. Kepisti, keperos, keperis. For the passive, perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, fourth principal part, coptus. It's a singular, so give it coptus all the way down. Add the appropriate helping verbs. Es, eros, eris. Coptus es, coptus eros, coptus eris. For the imperative, singular, active, it's second principal part, chop off the RE, cape, cape. For the passive, it's the second principal part, capere. For the plural active imperative, you take the present stem copy and add te, so it's capite, capite. And the passive is capimini, capimini. Optime. Mitto, mittere, missi, missus. To send, to let go. So, mitto, third person singular. First off, you need to know the principal parts. Notice the spelling. Singular S in the third person singular, and there's a doubled up S here in the fourth principal part. So, third conjugation. You can tell by the O, the R, the E, the Us. It's not AO, EO, or IO, EO. It's mitto, mittere, missi, missus. So, third conjugation. Chop the O off the first principal part to get the present stem mit. Romney. No. Willard. You mean Willard. So, M-I-T-T. Go ahead and write mit, the present stem, in the present, imperfect, and future, active, and passive. M-I-T-T. Mit, 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 mit. Third person singular. Add the I before the T. So mittit, mittit. Passive, mittitor, mittitor. Imperfect, E before the ba. Mittebat, mittebat. Passive, mittebatur, mittebatur. Future, don't you dare put bobus bit. I've seen too many mittebos in my career. You call that a career? Yes, I do. So, ames et, amos etus ent. Mittet, mittet, et, mittet, as opposed to the present mittit, tit. Stop giggling. The passive, mittettur, mittettur, etur, mittettur. Ar eris etur, emor emini entor, mittettur. All right, easy peasy, perfect, pluperfect, future perfect. Third principal part, M-I-S-I, chop off the I, M-I-S, miss, and then add appropriate endings. So missit, one S, missit, misserat, misserit. Passive, fourth principal part, missus, we're dealing with a singular person, so keep the us and add the aum, missus aum. There's a doubled up S there. Missus aum, and then est. Missus aum erat, missus aum erit. The imperative singular active. Second principal part, chop off the RE, mitte, mitte. In the passive, second principal part, mittere, mittere. The plural, mittite, mittite. And the passive, mittimini, mittimini. Optime. Number the next one. Conicio, conicere, conieci, coniectus. So this is a compound of cum and yacio. So not just to yacio throw it, but to really throw it, conicio, to hurl, to cast with force. So be careful on this one because there are a lot of I's going on here. There's a play on consonantal I, ya, and vowel I, e. So be careful. First off, know the principal parts. Conicio, conicere, conieci, coniectus. Notice that here in the third and the fourth principal part, what is a vowel I, conicere, and conicio becomes a ya, a consonant I, so conieci. In the Middle Ages, this I would be written as a J. Conjectus, like a conjecture. Something you just throw out there. So conicio, 3rd-io. Chop the O off the first principal part to get the present stem, and it ends in the letter I, so it's a 3rd-io, conici. Go ahead and write conici as the base for the present, imperfect, future, active, and passive, conici. Then you add first person plural endings, conicimus, conicimur, add the E before the ba and the imperfect, conicie bamus, conicie bamur. The future, don't you dare put bobus bit. You're going to put ames et, amos etus ent, like a good Abbey boy. Coniciemus, coniciemur, ar, ers, etor, amor, emini, entor, koniki, amor. For the perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, third principal part, konjek, and then add imus, and then eramos, and then erimus. Konjekimus, konjekeramos, konjekerimus. For the passive, it's the fourth principal part, konjektus, but we are dealing with a plural person. Therefore, change the us to e, konjekti. The feminine a becomes I, and the neuter singular becomes a. So write konjekti I a, and konjekti I a, and konjekti I a. So konjekti I a, and then the helping verb. Konjekti I a sumus, konjekti I a eramus, konjekti I a erimus. For the imperative singular active, second principal part, chop off the re, konike, konike. For the passive, second principal part, konikere, konikere. For the imperative plural active, you have konikite, konikite. And then for the passive, konikimini, konikimini. Optime. Very well done. So we're moving on to the last one. Duco, ducere, duxi, ductus. Second person plural. All right. So very ubiquitous verb. This verb is all over the place. Present stem is duke. It's a third conjugation. You're chopping the O off of the first principal part. So duc, duke, right? Duke, 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 and duke in the present imperfect, future active, and passive. Second person plural. So ducatus, ducatus, passive ducimini. Perfect E before the ba. Ducebatus, ducebomini. Don't put Boba Spit. Ducatus, E-T-I-S, ducatus. Ducamini, ducamini. Perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, perfect stem. Dux, D-U-X. So duxistus, duxistus. Duxeratus, duxeritus. Perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, fourth principal part, ductus, but make sure you give it plural endings. Ducti, I, a, estis. Ducti, I, a, eratis. Ducti, I, a, eritis. Now for the imperative singular, hold up. Remember, there are 4 irregular imperatives in Latin, and they sound like funny English words. They are dic, duke, fac, and fair. That's right, dic, duke, fac, and fair. Dico, duco, facio, and ferro. So here we have duke, D-U-C, duke. Second principal part passive is ducere. Plural active is ducite, ducite. And the plural passive is ducimini, ducimini. Optime, very well done. That wraps it up for exercise A. You are now ready to move on to exercise B.